didn't
right.
say coffee. I've not like coffee. So, you know, just loosey goosey.
Action.
There are many reasons why editing is vital to film. According to Walter Murch, there are a selection of rules all editors should take into account when they reach the post-production stage. They are to generate emotion, meaning how will this cut affect the audience emotionally? For continuity, meaning visual storytelling, does the change of shot seem to make sense? Story, will the decision to cut move the story forward in a meaningful way? Rhythm, is the cut at a point where it makes rhythmical sense? Eye trace, how does the cut affect the location of the audience's focus in that particular scene? In this film, we are going to cover all elements of editing right from the beginning. First, let's take a look at the history of film. Back in the 1920s, film was gaining more popularity, but was still in its infancy. Thank you very much for your feedback on this film, and we hope to see you again. Vyacheslav Pudovkin, yes, that's his actual name, was a leading Russian filmmaker at the time, and as an entirely new industry grew, he set the groundwork for editing and acting techniques that are still used to this day. It makes sense to cut between two different scenarios to highlight this contrast between them. For example, cutting between a poor person and a very rich person. This is when you cut between two seemingly unrelated scenes and focus on the similar features within them. To give an example, say you're filming a documentary and you have a shot of a fisherman on a boat and then cut to a family eating fish at a table. This creates an association in the viewer's mind. This is when you cut from one thing to another, which have symbolic meaning. This could be a protest where police are beating people in the streets. Then you cut to cattle being slaughtered. The audience will associate the slaughter of the cattle to the beating of the people. Finally, leitmotiv, put simply, is a reoccurring shot in a film. Think of how Spielberg uses a point of view shot in Jaws, showing the shark looking up at the swimmers. As this happens more than once, the viewer learns that whenever they can see this happen, an attack is imminent.
Maybe we should get a facelift, just to bring my cheeks out a bit more. Just. Oh, don't worry if this is all a bit complex. Just remember that editing film is almost always more than putting footage in the correct order. We're gonna have to revisit this section, but for now, let's take a look at editing for specific genres. Goodbye.
Tom, is that you? Look, this isn't funny anymore. Whatever you're playing at, just stop. Stop. And I will strike down upon thee with great vengeance and furious anger. For those who attempt to poison and destroy my pussy!
From this scene, we can see that editing has been used to enforce and in some instances create humour. An example of this is when the normal man comes into the heated conversation between the people talking gibberish. Can you find any other examples where editing is used to enforce or create
You
humour?
stole my cat. I never touched your cat. I'm allergic to pussy.
In this action scene, involving two totally different characters than we saw previously, we can tell that editing is very fast paced, and it has to be because of the nature of the film.
Nice copy. It's great, but it's nice.
You don't like it, do you?
I do, but I'm more of a tea person.
I should have said so. Then you see here as well.
I was going to say. But I kinda got distracted looking into your eyes.
My eyes? What's so special about my eyes?
You'll laugh.
Oh, I promise I won't.
Every time I look into your eyes, I just lose myself. Even now, as I'm speaking to you.
Kiss me.
Yeah, let's leave that there. The difference in this more romantic scene is that the editing starts off at a slower pace, then gradually, as Swarray and Viran begin to fall madly in love with each other, it gets quicker.
What you just saw there was an example of how a horror scene might be edited to make the audience feel tension. On a basic level, horror films are the easiest to analyse in terms of editing. Let's bring section. We have learned that editing can create and enforce the audience to feel certain emotions, depending on the genre, of course. It can also introduce a certain mood to any scene. Now, we've had a brief history of editing, and we've looked at editing for specific genres. Now let's talk about how you should go about editing your films, in a section I like to call Editing Do's and Don'ts. Put simply, it is when, say for example, a cup is on the right side of the shot in one scene, and in the next shot is on the left. This spoils the illusion of the scene.
Imagine, if you can, two characters opposite each other. Now place an imaginary line between them. The camera operator must choose one side of the line to shoot all pieces of footage on, including the master, the single shots and the reverse shots of each character. They must never cross that line, otherwise the end result will look strange to the audience.
Parallel editing is used to show two things happening at the same time, by cutting between them. It is also a heavy tool for foreshadowing, and when used correctly, can build tension. It can bring a normal scene to life. We'll touch upon this technique in more detail soon. From this section, we have learned how to comprehensively edit our own footage and learn important rules about filming.
It's time to revisit the history of film. What you're seeing here was created by Georges Méliès in 1902 and is entitled A Trip to the Moon. This colour version was considered lost for several decades. It was then found in 1993 by Filomete Decano de Catalunya in a very poor condition. In 1990, restoration work began to rescue the digitalised the elements. Finally, in 2010, the complete restoration of the film was launched, 109 years after its creation. This is one of the most earliest examples of CGI being used in film. Yes, it's clearly not gravity, but these kinds of effects would have been almost impossible to achieve back then. No one had seen anything like it before. Now, we take colour TV for granted, but in this film, the colour would have been added by artists literally painting every single frame on a roll of film.
Edward S. Porter originally worked as a projectionist at the Vitaskop marketing company and was part of a team of men who projected a movie show in New York on the 23rd of April 1896. He then put his electrical engineering skills to good use in Edison's manufacturing company before leaving to become a freelance projectionist at the Eden Muse Theatre in 1898. Whilst working as a projectionist, one of the Porter's many duties included the illegal duplication of Méliès films. He would take part on one-act reels and combine several of these into a 15-minute program. A fan of the films of Georgiev Méliès, Porter tried to emulate the trick photography which Méliès had introduced to the world and had provided incredibly successful in films such as The Finish of Bridget McKean 1901 and Jack and the Beanstalk 1902. Porter was also one of the first directors to shoot at night in his Pan-American Exposition by night.
Porter's skill with editing and methods of projection were used to great effect in some of his earliest films. He adopted a documentary style of filmmaking. It combined real stock footage of fires, firemen and fire engines with dramatised scenes which Porter shot. This juxtaposition added tension to the filmmaking. It was truly dramatic in a contemporary setting, unlike Méliès, whose filmatic drama was derived from his film's fantasy settings. Porter was convinced from the audience reaction that he had discovered a new way of telling stories and developed his ideas the following year with the release of The Great Train Robbery. perhaps the most influential film of that decade.
Porter was the first filmmaker to ever use parallel editing in film. Parallel editing, when used in the right place and for the right reasons, can make film much more interesting to watch. It appears in The Great Train Robbery to show two things happening simultaneously, but in different locations, although the concept was not fully explored. This enabled others to build on it. Hitchcock has been known to use it also. He used it to introduce two main characters at the start of a film. It gives you an idea that these two men will eventually meet. Parallel editing is taken one step further in Francis Ford Coppola's The Godfather to develop theme. The cross-cutting back and forth during the baptism scene shows the contradictory lives of Michael Corleone. In the church, Michael accepts God and renounces Satan, but parallel editing shows hitmen recruited by Michael murdering his enemies. You may have noticed the use of transitions throughout this really well edited, marvelously researched piece of informational filmmaking, not to mention the fabulous writing and cast too. Transitions are used to break up the action normally at the end of a scene. Common transitions are
Action.
fades in and fades out, like the one you've just seen, are most commonly found in films. An example of when you might use a fade to black and white is when a complex scene is played out. Certain characters might be killed or further information that advances the plot is revealed. Fades cause the audience to take in all the relevant information they have just seen on screen. It's sort of like a break for the audience in a way. Dissolves are commonly used between scenes. A dissolve can show the passing of time or moving to a different country. It has the ability to create an emotional landscape. Also, it creates a smooth development from one scene to another. Finally, Star Wars films use cheap style transitions because they want to maintain an adventurous or comic book feel. Before the digital age, films were edited by a skilled professional who cut the film by hand. You could only edit film in a linear order, or in the order that it was shot. Occasionally, they would run certain sections of the film through a secondary tape player, and only when the master tape had been cut, leaving a space for more footage, could that section be added into the main film.
Non-linear editing is when an editor picks and chooses what area they want to edit. It can be in any order they want. To edit in this manner, you can use programs like Final Cut Pro 7X or Sony Vegas. Editors nowadays are able to think differently in the way they edit, creating brand new techniques that may even be unique to them.
To conclude, editing will always remain a vital part of filmmaking because it gives what is at first a random set of footage meaning and emotion. It literally brings a story a writer or director is trying to tell come alive and seem real. That's all for this video. Thanks for watching.